Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a timely discussion as we review CHOGM 2022. This is the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that took place from 20th to 26th June. And we're also going to look at certain agreements, key agreements that were made, not just only in Rwanda, but amongst Commonwealth countries, as well as looking at event planning and engagement with the private sector. My name is Dana Mpisi, host of The Square, and I'm happy to welcome tonight our guests, our esteemed guests. And I'll start with the gentleman seated to my right, British High Commissioner, Mr. Omar Dyer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great.
It's great to be here.
Great. Also joining us, our guests, Rwanda Convention Bureau CEO, Nelly Mukazaire. A warm welcome to you, Nelly.
Thank you very much for inviting me tonight.
Thank you. Also joining us on behalf of the private sector is Brenda Nyakira, the MD, Managing Director of Ikaze PCO. Brenda, it's a pleasure to have you on The Square tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Also joining us, resident panelist, Charlie Haba. Always a pleasure hosting with you.
Same here, Dana. How are you?
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Brenda Namata is also another resident panelist who usually joins us, but she's not here with us, but I'm sure she'll be following the discussion. And I just want to tell our viewers, to tweet. We're going to be reading out your comments. Usually you can tweet using #TheSquareRW. So we'll dive straight into it. It's a meaty subject, and I'll start with, the first question to Your Excellency, the High Commissioner. So this was a milestone event for Rwanda, an event that was cancelled twice due to the pandemic, so really highly anticipated. So we had more than 50 Commonwealth heads of government in attendance, business, philanthropy, and civil society leaders, including their Royal Highnesses, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. High Commissioner, from your perspective, what were some of the agreements, not just between Rwanda and the UK, but key agreements just also amongst Commonwealth countries as a result of this very important and eventful meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that it was huge, right? I mean, this was, I think, the biggest thing that Rwanda's ever hosted, but it would be pretty big for anybody. So the first thing I'd like to say is congratulations to the organizers who did a really fantastic job. I think it was a great event and a really good showing off of Kigali. When I try and think about what came out of the Commonwealth Summit, I sort of think about it in three boxes. You can think about what was agreed and discussed at the Commonwealth level. You can think about what was agreed bilaterally with Rwanda. I obviously can talk mostly about the UK agreements there, but there were others as well. And then what were the outcomes for Rwanda more generally, beyond the Commonwealth from hosting something so big? And I think when you look at the Commonwealth itself, one of the best things about it was first that we were getting together again after so long. This is a really important grouping of countries, one of the biggest in the world. It covers about a third of the world's population. We just had another couple of countries join, with Togo and Gabon coming in at this summit. So it's a really important grouping. And I think what they were saying together is that we stand together, whether it's about standing up to malign actors, to difficult problems, but it's also about how do we stand together on tackling big global issues. And I think what you saw discussed there was particularly around recovery from COVID, the economic recovery, and their trade is really important. And I think, driving up trade amongst Commonwealth members is something that they really discussed. And our Prime Minister talked about how you get a sort of 21% uplift to your trade within the Commonwealth when you're a member. They also talked about climate change. The UK and Rwanda work very closely on climate change, and we co-hosted a side event on it. And I think that really showed how we were looking at how do you carry the message from COP26 through to COP27 in Egypt. And at that side event, we were talking about new money that the UK is announcing for that. The Rwandans also talked about the Kigali principles on carbon credits, which I think is really important, and also a chance to highlight kind of green businesses and so on. But then there were other things at the Commonwealth level, whether it was about neglected tropical diseases, where over $1 billion in new funding, $1 billion in new funding was put there, whether it was about the Kigali Declaration on care and protection of children was really important. So there was all that at the Commonwealth level. At the bilateral level, there were announcements from the UK on things like education, which we think is really important, particularly girls' education. And we announced 200 million or more than 200 million pounds of new money for girls' education, 60 million of which will be spent here in Rwanda. We announced new money for cyber security and cyber partnerships. We announced new new work on voluntary organizations. VSO, which works in Rwanda, has got more funding. But then we also announced a developing countries trade partnership scheme, which will make trading with the UK cheaper and easier for 18 Commonwealth countries, including Rwanda. So all that is sort of on the bilateral one. Then I know sort of Canada and others also announced a lot of other deals. But then finally, I'd just talk about what were the outcomes for Kigali and for Rwanda beyond the Commonwealth itself. And I think when you host something like this, the first thing it shows is your global influence. It shows that Rwanda has convening power, that it can get people together for these really important events. And it wasn't just the Commonwealth. We saw that with the ITU, with the Sustainable Energy for All partnership. Then it was also good for tourism. I think people saw a lot of how beautiful this country is and will probably come back, including my delegates. But then there was new investment in things like green businesses, green technologies. There was new cash with all these people coming here, staying at hotels, eating at restaurants. I think in the post-COVID era, that's really important. But then the final point I'd say about it is I think it was also really important for people to come here and see the story of Rwanda for themselves. Because, it's easy from a distance to, have dated opinions, to, pick things up from Twitter or from elsewhere, but nothing compares to coming and seeing it for yourself. And I think what delegates saw and what you heard from His Royal Highness or from the UK Prime Minister was a real understanding of the journey that Rwanda has been on. And I think that too is a benefit of hosting these sorts of things.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very well said. Charles, do you want to weigh in before we go to the next questions with our remaining guests?
I can't really add, but I think it's extremely important to underscore what His Excellency has just said around the milestone and what Rwanda has done to put itself on the map. If I was the appointing authority, I would make Nelly the minister without portfolio, because she's really done. I mean, she's done an amazing job, and having her on the show here would allow me to promote her. But Rwanda, again, has not yet disappointed. Rising to the occasion when it matters most. And it's usually difficult to blow your own trumpet, and sometimes it's advisable not to. But on this particular occasion, I think we have bragging rights. Whether the British like it or not, whether they send the migrants here or they don't, we have bragging rights. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Nelly. Charles just, that was a segue into the next part of the conversation. Event planning. So this event has been lauded by many, the seamless coordination from, the tourism and hospitality, the meetings, access, and that sort of thing. So if you could just share with us, Nelly, if you could take us through the process, for people who really want to understand the planning of CHOGM, as well as what this means for the MICE industry in Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you, Charles, and Your Excellency Ambassador, for us being on this platform. It's really important. First of all, I would also say, as His Excellency the President said, congratulations to everybody who was involved in this, because it wasn't one person or one institution effort. And if I want to touch on the event planning of CHOGM per se, I would even start by the whole beginning of being a destination that is able to host such kind of an event. So I would see even the starting point from the initiative or the decisions made by the government to make Rwanda as a destination for what we call business events or MICE industry. That is meetings, incentives, conferences and events. So that started from the initiative since 2015 that government took to invest in the destination in terms of providing security that is needed, infrastructure needed, the convention center, Kigali Arena, currently Beka Arena, Inhare Arena and others, including also hotels of big names or hotels of big brands that will be able to attract people to the destination. So the whole starting point is even there, from that decision of making this a destination. Easy of access, with all connectivity that Rwanda has, with visa upon arrival, All those are competitive advantage that we take advantage from as a destination to be able to also host the different events you've seen Rwanda hosting, and even particularly CHOGM. So when it comes to this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, it starts also from the big leadership. The leadership, because all this could not have come to Rwanda if we didn't have a visionary leadership that positioned the country in terms of content or in terms of what we can discuss or give or show as a country, but also in terms of facility people can get when they come in the country. So if I go in details in terms of the planning, how it was done, we had a leadership that also has a steering committee. We had a ministerial steering committee. We had leadership at the top level from the president, even the prime minister, following up on how all the preparations are done. And we also had a technical team, which was headed by the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. And after that, all players, including even private sector, I think Brenda will talk about it more, we worked together. If you talk of operations of airport, how are you going to receive people? I'm trying to give example. That included the authority of airport itself, but also all service providers that work there, whether they're in transport, whether they are in hospitality, or to name a few. So it went to all steps. When you look at transport, all private sector, we even had a command post that included government institution, but also private sector involved in that sector. To all levels, from transport to accommodation. For example, this year is the first year we had 2 companies at starting point, which are from private sector, which were working with the government and also hotels for the booking of rooms. And like in the past, when we had to book through different platforms that are not even local, this year we had private sector, local companies, Rwandan companies, working with the different hotels to set up a booking system that will help all delegates, but also will make the industry generate money locally. So I would say it had different layers of including leadership at high level, leadership at technical level or line institutions that are concerned, but also private sector players. In particular, we also saw the effort that was put in hospitality sector. There was what the private sector was doing to boost and also to improve themselves, but also the effort government did through RDB and also other institutions to bring experts in different domains to support the hospitality sector so that we are really ready to be able to help our delegates. So the focus was to see, yes, we are planning this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, but we aim at having 3 objectives. One was also, as the ambassador mentioned, what is going to be discussed there? What are the decisions which are going to be taken? What is the impact that it's going to have today and in the next 2 years that His Excellency the President is going to be the chairman and the country will be leading? The second was, how do we get prepared to welcome these people in a seamless manner? And that involved everybody. And the last one was also, what experience are they going to go back with? And we saw a big role of private sector, especially in that. I will name a few. We saw experience people had at Imbuga, at the car-free zones we have in Kisimenti and Nyamirambo. We had also other places. You've seen the Chop Life party or show that we had in the arena. All those were also initiatives of the private sector to make sure that people who are coming to Rwanda, they don't take only the message as ambassadors in terms of what they see that the country has been able to achieve, but also which experience they have lived when they are here. So in brief, I would say that it was 1, leadership that is visionary, 2, combined effort from all stakeholders, including private sector, 3, maximizing the impact or the experience people are going to live so that they become ambassadors and they come back to the country. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nelly, and kudos once again to RCB and the myriad of different stakeholders that were involved. It was really, when it started, I thought there would be blocked roads, I thought there would be crazy traffic.
You mean there were none?
Well, not for me. Not for me. Maybe on Saturday, because people were leaving. Everyone was leaving on the same day.
I want to know where you're staying.
No, it was. I really had a great experience. Brenda, the next question, before I come back to you, Charles, is on private sector engagement. So the show before this one, actually with the Deputy High Commissioner, Mr. Ben Snowden, we were looking at private sector engagement, and we were really wondering how can Rwanda private sector actors really position themselves to benefit from the opportunities during CHOGM. So we were really wondering, how ready, how prepared, how innovative, how flexible they were, versatile they were to really reap the benefits from such a very important and eventful meeting. And Brenda, if you could just tell us more about the work you do and how your company participated in the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
Thank you so much. So I'll give you a background of what we do, the work that we do. ICAZE PCO, which stands for Professional Conference Organizers, are an event management company that specialize in planning and management of events, conferences, and meetings. When CHOGM was announced, for us it was a no-brainer. We're a young creative team, and I think for us, there were two things for us that were important for us when we were planning these events. One of them was, like Nelly mentioned, the experience. What are people experiencing? Because we're in the tourism sector, we want return clients. So what are people experiencing when they come here to Kigali? Are they mingling with their locals? Do they feel like some sort of attachment when they come? Are they buying from artisans and food vendors? So are they having, a real authentic experience of the country? The second thing also was, what was important for us when we were creating these events, it was the impact of, of the event on local people, on the Abaturage. So for example, when we organized the street festival, it was really to support small and medium enterprises. It was basically a market where we had 95% of the vendors were SMEs. Like I mentioned before, artisans and also food vendors. And I think, when it comes to festivals and, social events, I think that's really the best way to connect with international delegates. So we hosted 3 events. One was the 6-day street festival, which was at Imbuga City Walk. The second was a golf networking tournament. This is really targeted at the business community here in Rwanda and also the international delegates. And the third was a cricket tournament where we had, some cricket legends play and also some delegates who attended some of the forums attending as well. Diane, I think you asked about, how easy is it, for us to host such events. I think we really have been spoon-fed in this industry. The infrastructure that has been invested in the past few years, especially like the venues. For example, I don't know if you've been to Imbuga City Walk, the area sort of lends itself to any sort of event. We have benches there already so people can sit and eat there if they wanted to. You have free Wi-Fi for people. There's ample spaces, parking space around for people to park their cars and, just come and literally spend the whole day there. Yeah.
Thank you. I really like what you said when you said we've been spoon-fed. I know on the square we really have discussions, Charles, you, Brenna, and I, regarding the private sector and how it needs to do more, really. The infrastructure is there, government has invested, and there's just so much for the private sector to thrive. And your comment, I find it really interesting, Brenda. Charles, over to you.
First time I've had somebody shower Imbuga City Walk with praises because Brenda talks about ample parking. I don't see where the parking is around Imbuga City Walk, but it's not a show about Imbuga City Walk. But I think we've given credit where it's due, and I'll agree entirely with what Brenda has said, Nelly, in terms of the infrastructure development. And government has an obligation, and I think Rwanda is known for punching above its weight, and they've not fallen short of that. I think I want to smoke some of what Nelly and her colleagues smoke because if I haven't been to many CHOGM events, I've followed quite a number of them online. I even made a deliberate move before this show to see how did some of these guys pull this off. Some of the venues, like where the heads of state and government forum took place, I haven't seen any event as beautiful as that anywhere in the world, especially in the recent past. So we really punched above our weight, and we should continue to do so. From an event planning, and that's I believe that's the question you asked me, Diana, and coordination. I think that's where the improvement needs, because now that we pulled off CHOGM very successfully, Nelly and her team are in a bit of an uncomfortable position because the world expects that they should pull off similar or even bigger events overnight. And I'll just give very constructive criticism in terms of where things should be improved. On day one, and I attended a number of events, key one being the Commonwealth Business Forum. Quite a number of my friends had to leave the venue to find food. That's because time overran. So was it an issue of the vendors? Was it an issue of being overwhelmed? Probably yes, probably not. But let's also talk about private sector involvement and how you prepare people to tell them, you may make money, you may not make money. So for a guy who runs a small boutique by the mosque in the middle of the CBD, and you're going to tell this guy that I'm going to close your shop that brings you 2,000 francs a day because you're going to have guests, you better have a plan for this guy. For you to tell somebody who has a small kiosk or who runs a supermarket, who has clothes around the convention center, and there's a number of businesses around there, that there's thousands of guests who are going to be in town for 7 days, and they'll need to buy dresses and neckties and cufflinks from you, so better stock up. And the guy stocks up, and then you tell him, oh, we're so sorry, people cannot come to you. Just prepare him for that. He will understand and take his family on holiday out of town.
So you're basing this on?
Planning.
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 But you're basing this on hypothetically, or these are things
No, this is
that
actually what happened, because in CBD people could not get. People who have their shops around MP's Plaza, it was a no-go zone. People who have their shops around Kigali Heights and KBC, it was a no-go zone. So I think it's extremely important that the coordination and the planning, and everybody would understand. You know, in our Rwandan culture, when you have guests at home, you leave the bedrooms for them, and you go and sleep elsewhere. So it's not a problem. It's just, you just prepare us for it, and we sort of live with it, and would appreciate it. However, that said, I think the bigger point is that we did CHOGM, and I want to really emphasize this point for the Brendas of this world, that the government of Rwanda has done a fantastic job in terms of infrastructure. My life is cricket, and I play tennis. At Gahanga, we had a very good cricket ground. Today, it is a superb world-class ground because of CHOGM. Our washrooms, the facilities, we even have an extra ground. The government of Rwanda has an opportunity to move from an 8-team tournament to a 12-team tournament because of CHOGM. So the roads that lead there to Chichuchiro and around the convention center and around Kachiru, the infrastructure is here for our grandchildren. We need to ensure that that investment that the government has put in and its stakeholders benefits all the people around it, such that next year when we're hosting the FIFA conference or a much bigger conference, we don't have a situation where the private sector is not making money from that infrastructure. Yes.
True. You know, I wish Brenna was here. I know she said when you're having discussions ahead of this show that the impact will be felt by generations to come regarding this meeting. And you know, you mentioned a few salient points like infrastructure and that sort of thing. Nelly, I'd like you to weigh in on what Charles said regarding, you know, sort of a forewarning to certain businesses, you know, is there something you'd like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Charles and Diana. I think it's key. It's very good feedback to always see how we make sure everything that is being done is also aligning with enabling also the business environment to continue. And I'll name some measures that were taken particularly for this meeting. And these were also working with different institutions based on lessons learned in the past. For example, all of you saw the travel advisory that was coming out from the police. That was a measure which was new, which we didn't have in the past, which was to show people, for example, this road may not be functional at some point, but you can have alternative routes to use. That was in the aim of making sure that as much as we are hosting CHOGM, which was a big meeting, as even Ambassador mentioned, that life continues, that business continues. And we must appreciate, to be practical here, that even places where closure were happening, it wasn't every day. It could have been some hours, it could have been some time in the day because of the movements or because of the activities that are happening there. So indeed, it's important to continue learning and continue improving to make sure how do we align the two, that we are hosting these events, which is a strategic priority, but also life continues and business continues because it's also a strategic sector of the country. So for this year, I know for a fact that measures were taken, working with the city of Kigali, working with traffic police, to make sure that we allow also other activities to continue. But also, the results or impact of such kind of big meetings, even if you have closed your shop for a day, you also get them in the days coming. Let's say, for example, you may not have been able to sold the number of dresses that Charles mentioned that have been stocked or the number of ties. But when such kind of event happen in the economy, revenues are created in the economy, you have that multiplier effect that is going up to also to the capacity or the revenues that goes to the normal Rwandan. Who is going to be your next customer in the next 6 months or the next 1 year? You may have not got the benefit right there in that week immediately, but it's going to come in the future. And that is where visionary leadership and planning comes in. Revenues in such kind of events or in our sector are in different ways. There are those which are immediate. For example, people have spent in the hotel, people have gone in restaurants and bought some food, but even some went to buy things in Imbuga or other places. Maybe one has been affected, as you mentioned, in a specific area for one day or for some hours, but it will come back to the person in another way. So that's what I can mention. So future, we are seeing ourselves improving, working with different stakeholders. I keep mentioning that because the work Rwanda Convention Bureau does cannot really be implemented by just Rwanda Convention Bureau. We work with government institutions, we work with private sector to make sure that that is functioning. Now to say that the last comment, when you mentioned cricket now has improved because of CHOGM and different some other facilities, or will even improve or even others. The leadership of this country aligns all strategic sectors, and every investment that is done is deliberate in either an immediate effect to the population right there, or even immediate effect to the population in the future. Let me just give that practical example. The road of Kichukiro that goes to Gahanga. Yes, it has helped in terms of what we were doing in CHOGM, but the construction of that road has also a bigger vision of the airports we are building there, a bigger vision of other infrastructures and other investments that are going to be there. So MICE being one of strategic sector, it comes in alignment also with other strategic sectors of the country. The roads we see of all the peripheric roads that have been used that helped us in CHOGM to be used as alternative roads. When you look past CHOGM, they are still beneficial for some other future strategic sectors or strategic events or strategic investments that the country is doing. So I love to see that all that is being done in line with the strategic sectors of the country, but also enabling the destination. Because for me, as you said, as Rwanda Convention Bureau in the mandate of selling the destination, of course, the more infrastructure, the more beautifulness, the more enabling environment we get, the easier it's become to us in our mandate of selling the destination as the best destination. And the fact or numbers speak by themselves. We came from being the 29th destination in 2015. We went to 17. Today, Kigali City is the 3rd in Africa as a destination for mice. So I believe with more infrastructures that are being made today and more exercise, why not are we not going to be the first in the near future?
You know, I need to give. I need to give Nelly ammunition for what she's saying. The property values have shot up by almost 300% because of CHOGM. The properties that are along the roads that were done because of CHOGM have shot up, and that's business for me. I'm in the real estate world. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. But I do not want to be misunderstood. The point I'm raising is for the Brendas and the Nellies of this world, that from a coordination and a planning perspective, there's always room for improvement.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hi, Commissioner. Yes, please. You've been listening. I would like to hear your thoughts on what all the panelists have said so far.
Well, the first thing, there's been a couple of mentions about ties so far. And maybe people have got stocks of ties that they haven't sold. So if you do have stocks, sell them to me.
I can see that's a made in Rwanda tie.
This is a made in Rwanda
Fantastic.
tie. But beyond that, I think what Charles is saying is right, that, you know, there will be sort of winners and losers in some of this when you have to close roads. And if you prepare people for that, I think it is really important. But what I saw this time was that it was a really coming together of not just government, but artists, civil society, other businesses, and so on, and really contributing. You know, we saw fashion shows, we saw dance competitions, you know, you had the youth forum, which looked like a huge party. And it really felt like it wasn't just the government doing something. And I think that's really important with these sorts of events, because, you know, I'm a regular viewer of your show, and I've heard you both talk before about the needs, you know, if you want tourists to come and to stay longer, you've also got to have all the other things around that make it a fun place to stay, that, you know, people want to party. I think, Charles, you said that people should go home broke after spending all their money, which I agree with. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're starting to see the private sector, the artist sector, culture really growing. And I think if you want to become a successful MICE destination, you also need that outside of government. So you can depend on government to do some of it, but you can't depend on them to do all of it. So I think the more that we can bring in the private sector to that, the better. Yeah,
I really like the vibrancy of CHOGM that it brought, you know, from the Chop Life concert to the fashion week, well, the fashion show and all that. Yes, the meetings were important, but I'm just really hoping, like you said, High Commissioner, these things are permanent. Within our private sector, you know, post-CHOGM. You know, usually I know on the show we're a bit tough on regulators, you know, shutting down events, noise pollution, and I feel like the entertainment industry is a bit hyper-regulated, but I'm really hoping CHOGM, looking post-CHOGM, this vibrancy is here to stay. So you're really spot on that. Brenda, I want to hear from you before we go to our Twitter feed.
I think for me, I really just wanted to comment on what Charles was saying, especially about some business suffering. I think as private sector, we need to learn how to pivot sometimes, especially young businesses. For example, during CHOGM, if, you know, the road was closed to your shop, why not get a stall, a market stall at Imbuga, because you know we're going to have traffic coming that way. So yeah, my final word would be, if you can, pivot, especially during these events, you know, find out, you know, come up with innovative ideas of how you can sell to, you know, the delegates that are coming, learn your audience, especially. For example, we had some vendors who were selling bulky stuff that did not sell, one, because the delegates weren't able to take them back in their suitcases. So, you know, it's just being able to think on your feet, especially if you can, as a young business especially, because it works well eventually.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brenda. I'd like to go to a Twitter feed, and I'd like to encourage our viewers to share the tweets using hashtag #TheSquareRW. So the first tweet, if we could have that on our screens, is from Bose Nibamge, if I'm not mistaken. He or she says, great topic. what will be the exact role of Rwanda and His Excellency Paul Kagame as the chairperson in terms of what CHOGM stands for. Precisely how does it play out? What are the deliverables, expectations? So they have an agenda and timelines, etc. Otherwise, a well-organized CHOGM. That is from Boseni Bamwe. We have another tweet coming in, if we could also have this on our screens. It's from Louis Businye, who says, everyone did a commendable job. A special hats off for Rwanda Police for the seamless traffic during the event and everyone involved in the roadworks during the build-up. CHOGM2022 was a tremendous success. I second Louis, Charles. Honestly, there was no traffic.
Generous with his words.
You know, people could move around.
Seamless.
Yeah, people could move around. So we'll be reading a couple of tweets, but you know, I just want to see if we could also answer the tweet, Your Excellency, British High Commissioner, the tweet about, I know you can't speak on behalf of the President, but you know, you have an understanding of the inner workings. He's assumed chair of the Commonwealth. You know, if you could, you know, respond in your capacity to that tweet.
Yeah, I mean, just to take the other tweet first, on the police, because I do want to say thank you to them too, because I also know that a lot of the police, at least who are accompanying our delegation, came from outside Kigali. Some of them came from Bugesera, from other places, and so they were brought in to help with this, and they did a really great job, so that was really helpful. On the chair in office, so the way the Commonwealth works is you have a secretariat which is based in the UK and headed by a Secretary General, currently Patricia Scotland, and they are the sort of administrative power behind it. They run the meetings, that sort of thing. But it's the chair in office that's really the political driver. It's the chair in office who will take the things that were discussed here in Kigali and think, how do we actually make sure that we deliver them, and putting some real impetus behind them. And as you say, I can't speak for His Excellency the President, but the one thing I think I do know about the President is he doesn't take on a title just to have the title. He doesn't want it just for his business card. He wants it because it will then deliver something. Rwanda will have something to show at the end of these 2 years of what it has delivered. And I think that's going to be really interesting. I think particularly in space like on climate and so on, but also in promoting green businesses. We'll see some stuff there on innovation. You'll see progress there. So I think there'll be a lot of progress there. And I think it'll also be for Rwanda to work very closely with the Secretariat. You know, if I'm honest, there have been some issues with the Secretariat in the past, and we think that the heads this time agreed on some reforms to how the Secretariat would run to make it a bit more effective. And I think the government of Rwanda can help drive that forward over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Yeah, so we're coming towards the end of the show, you know, and I just want us in the, you know, the 10, 15 minutes we have just to reflect on it. But I want us to also look at post-CHOGM, you know, comments on, you know, Nelly, earlier on, Charles mentioned you're kind of in a hot seat because all eyes are on RCB, you know, maintaining this standard, in fact, raising it.
Nelly for Minister of Infrastructure.
Yes. Yeah, so, yeah, Charles, I second that. So, yeah, you know, just reflecting on this meeting and looking at post-CHOGM, what is some of your, what is some of your commentary on sort of standards, sort of things that should be maintained, because we've reached a certain level and you know we need to raise the bar, maintain the bar, the ante. And yeah, I'd just like to kick off with you, Nelly, over to Brenda, and finally to both of you.
Thank you very much, Diane. First of all, correct that all eyes are on Rwanda, not on the RCB. So before I respond to that, I wanted to add on what Ambassador just mentioned about the question that was asked. Indeed, Rwanda having the chairmanship through our leadership, or His Excellency the President, for the upcoming 2 years, we're going also to make sure, and that has been proven by even when our President was leading the reform of the AU, that it's going to be result-based. So as Ambassador mentioned, some of the things they discussed in line of the topic or the theme we had for this CHOGM, which is innovation, transformation, and delivering on a common future, is that those priorities discussed in the line of rule of law, in line of gender, in line of youth empowerment, in line of climate change, as he said, those are things that are going to be taken a step forward, and working together with different institutions and different states in the Commonwealth to make sure they become, at the end of the day, beneficial to our population. So I also believe, as Ambassador said, that it's going to be quite a challenging, exciting 2 years. but we believe that it's going to be a change. It's going to change the way things were delivered or working. So to come back to what you mentioned, yes, all eyes on Rwanda. We've been able to work together to deliver an event that is at a certain standard. 3 lines I'll look at is that, one, yes, as in our role as Rwanda Convention Bureau, we have to tap into that to continue and sell the destination in terms of what it offers, in terms of strategic priorities that the country has, but in terms also of making sure that the experienced delegates are going to have an experience that will make them come back. So when I come to that part is where we work together with also private sector. We need to continue working with RDB and other stakeholders on reinforcement hospitality. We've been so much really guided by His Excellency the President in terms of improving hospitality. A lot of effort has been done, but more needs to be done. So that is something that we need to continue working together on. Secondly, in the new strategy that even Rwanda Convention Bureau has is to reinforce on how we build on what we call homegrown events. So as much as we are hosting those different events coming from different ways, but how do we build the capacity of our private sector? How do we build the capacity of our young people, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and come up with an incubation system of coming up with homegrown events that aligns with our strategic sector? So that is also something, because it will make it more sustainable and also raising the standards indeed of how we deliver to those different events. And that goes in line with different policies and politics that are being, and decisions that are being made by the government, but also the role that the private sector continues to play into being able to deliver high standard quality events. Lastly, that involves empowerment of our private sector into trainings. We've been doing that in the past. We look forward to doing more and more in event management, event planning, production. One of the biggest niche today is sport tourism and entertainment. A lot of effort needs to be done in terms of having our teams and the private sector ready to take up that. So we have quite a number of other activities to do and opportunities to tap into working together with the private sector. So leveraging on what has been done, building capacity of private sector, building capacity of hospitality sector, but all that working with government, but also private sector.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Indeed, Nelly for Minister, as Charles said. Thank you very much, Nelly. I really like what you said about building our capacity for homegrown solutions to be on the same level. Very, very valid points there. Brenda, over to you.
I think as private sector, it's really important for us to piggyback on the work that the government is doing. Like Nelly mentioned, the focus is going to be in sports tourism for the next few years. So, as private sector, what initiatives are we coming up with? And also, my second point is collaboration. It's very important for us in the sector to collaborate. We all have our unique, attributes as PCOs or event management companies. For example, during the CHOGM events, we collaborated with many other event companies. For example, for the Imbuga City Walk, we collaborated with Kigali Farmers and Artisans Market, who basically brought the green aspect to the festival. So, for example, we're using solar lights, we're recycling, and we try to discourage as much as possible plastic use during the event. So I think finally my last point is, like I mentioned before, piggybacking on what the initiatives the government's coming up with. For example, now it's important to have green events to make sure our events are sustainable. We're using as little paper or plastic as possible, and just taking advantage of the infrastructure that's being built for us.
Yeah, Brenda, quick one. There's a tweet that came in that said, can Brenda tell us what was the cost for vendors to run a space in the CBD car-free zone?
So we had different packages, starting from 80,000 for the week, all the way up to 200,000 for vendors, for shared spaces or booths. And then, we had also food kiosks as well, which were going for 800,000 for the week as well.
All right, thank you. I just want to read this message before I go to you, Charles, and before we go to our High Commissioner. And it's a pity it's not on Twitter, but I just thought I'd have to read it. It's from Doris, who's watching all the way from Kenya, and she says, there was some unsung heroes of the CHOGM regarding the side event. So she says the Kigali Night Run that pulled in over 3,000 runners.
Oh, wow.
Many of those were CHOGM delegates. This is unprecedented anywhere in the world, she says. Two, the People's Festival in Nyamirambo. That was profound and spoke volumes in showcasing the other side of the city of Kigali. And finally, she says, these events gave locals a chance to interact with foreigners visiting during CHOGM. Just a thought. Thank you very much, Doris.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah,
on
sure.
Sunday, I had a conversation with 3 people who are investors in the local entertainment space, and we're having a drink at Pili Pili. And we all concurred that one of the things that CHOGM had done was to encourage Rwandese and local people and expatriates who live in Rwanda to go out and spend. So, and we have spoken about this on the show before, and it was around COVID and Visit Rwanda campaign, that sometimes you only have to give people who live in Rwanda an opportunity to spend, and they will spend. What CHOGM did is that it gave people who live in Rwanda an opportunity to express themselves and to spend. CHOGM was a scapegoat. I went out to quite a number of places, and I can count the number of foreigners who are there. So I think this is a huge defeat, as a challenge to Nelly and her crew, that we have the capacity internally, and that's I think the point your friend is raising, for people to actually sustain the businesses that have invested locally. Yes.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Over to you. Final remarks.
Well, I'd probably say 3 things. One, I think Nelly mentioned sort of rule of law and the importance of that, and I think that's also a good reminder that the Commonwealth is really a values-based organisation, and one of the things that helps attract investment within the Commonwealth is living up to those values of having good rule of law, good governance and so on. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Rwanda can both take those forward here in Rwanda and help the Commonwealth take those values forward. Second thing I'd say, that I think these 2 years that Rwanda is going to be chair in office are going to be even closer links between the UK and Rwanda. The way it works with the Commonwealth is you sort of have a troika, which is the previous chair and the next chair, which will be Samoa in this case, working with the current chair to take things forward. And I think between our migration partnership, I think we're in a really strong place for the UK and Rwanda, and that makes me very excited. And then the third and final thing I'd say is, CHOGM is one of the biggest things you can do, right? I mean, I said to my own team who were very stressed at the end of this week of looking after us, if you can do CHOGM, you can do anything. And now Rwanda hosted CHOGM, so you can host anything. So I'm really excited to see what's next.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Charles?
I have 2 things to say. One is what His Excellency has just said. If we can pull off all these kilometers of tarmac roads overnight, I don't understand why we have a dirt road in the city of Kigali. By 2024, all the dirt should be covered.
Tarmacked.
Because we can. We have proved that we can, and yes, we can, in record time. The second thing is, Nelly may have mentioned this in passing, but it's an extremely important fact that the government of Rwanda has invested profusely in our sports infrastructure. It's not enough to host events. We need to excel in the events that we host.
Very, very good point.
Yes. So equal investment needs to be put into making sure that our sports teams excel.
It's not just about the infrastructure. Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Really, I really wish they could have part 2 of this show, continue talking for a couple of hours, but we've come to the end of the show, and I'd just like to thank all our viewers, for sharing their comments. I would like to thank Your Excellency British High Commissioner. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show. Great. I would like to thank you, Nelly. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
Thanks
And
for the
Brenda, I would
opportunity.
really like to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your perspectives as a private sector actor.
Thank you too. It's a bucket list ticked.
Thank you. Charles, always a pleasure co-hosting with you. So keep the comments coming using #TheSquareRW. I'd like to thank our partners, Bourbon Coffee, for always supporting The Square. Have a good night. See you again next week.